In the heart of the Galactic Council Hall, towering stone pillars and glowing holographic banners stretched across the vast chamber. The air was thick with the scent of burning incense, a tradition of the Xilari race, proud warriors known for their ruthless strength. The hall was filled with the most powerful warlords of the galaxy, their piercing eyes fixed on a lone figure standing in the center. Princess Zyra, a 14-year-old girl with delicate silver skin and glowing violet eyes, stood trembling before them. Unlike the towering warriors of her race, she was small and fragile, her frame far too weak in their eyes to ever rule. Zyra's hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding as she looked around at the council members, elders who were supposed to protect her, guide her. Instead, they glared at her with disdain. A deep voice shattered the silence. "She is unworthy." The words came from Lord Vex, her uncle. He was a towering figure with thick, scaled skin and glowing red eyes, the leader of the council. Zyra's breath caught in her throat as he stepped forward, his voice echoing through the chamber. "This child is weak. She is not fit to rule the Xilari. Our throne belongs to the strong, not to a fragile girl who can barely lift a blade." The council murmured in agreement. Zyra could feel their judgment like a heavy weight pressing against her chest. "She has no place among us," another elder sneered. "If she cannot fight, she must be exiled." "Exile is too kind," Lord Vex said with a cruel smile. "She is useless to our people. Sell her to the slave markets. Let the highest bidder take her." Zyra gasped, her eyes widening in horror. Her own blood, her own family, was casting her away like trash. She turned, searching the faces of the council members, hoping, praying, that someone would speak for her, but no one did. Guards seized her by the arms, their grip tight and unyielding. "No, you can't do this." Zyra struggled, her voice trembling with desperation. Lord Vex merely smirked. "Take her away." She was dragged from the grand hall, her screams drowned beneath the laughter of those who had once sworn to protect her. The journey to the slave market was a blur of cold metal corridors and the hum of starship engines. Zyra sat in a cramped cage, her wrists bound in glowing shackles that suppressed what little strength she had. Every bump and turn of the ship made her stomach churn, but the worst part was the silence, the realization that she was truly alone. When the ship landed, Zyra was pulled from her cell and shoved into a massive auction hall. The air smelled of oil and sweat, the voices of countless alien species blending into a chaotic hum. She was lined up with others, creatures of different shapes and sizes, all awaiting their fate. A booming voice filled the room as the auctioneer, a grotesque alien with 3 glowing eyes and thick, wrinkled skin, stepped forward. "Next, we have something rare, a Xilari princess. Not much use in battle, but perhaps a delicate decoration for a noble's court." He chuckled, and the audience laughed along with him. Zyra lowered her gaze, her face burning with shame. She could hear the whispers, the disgust in their voices. "She's too small. No strength at all. Useless. I wouldn't pay a single credit for her." Tears burned in Zyra's eyes. Was this truly her fate? To be tossed aside, forgotten. Then, amid the sea of mocking voices, a new voice cut through the crowd. "I'll take her." Silence fell over the room. All eyes turned toward the speaker, a human. He stood at the back of the crowd, arms crossed over his chest. His dark brown hair was slightly unkempt, and his sharp, calculating eyes scanned the auction block with interest. He wore a rugged leather jacket over a reinforced combat suit, his entire presence exuding confidence. Zyra blinked in shock. A human. The aliens around him scoffed. "A human? What would your weak species do with her?" One of the bidders sneered. "She's worth nothing. Let him waste his credits." The auctioneer raised an eyebrow. "Are you sure, human? No refunds?" The man nodded. "I'm sure." The auctioneer shrugged. "Very well. Sold." The transaction was over in moments, And before Zira could even process what had happened, she was pulled from the stage and shoved toward her new owner. The man kneeled before her, his expression calm. "Name's Ethan Carter." Zira hesitated, her voice barely a whisper. "Zyra." He nodded and stood, leading her away from the auction block. As they walked, Zyra stole glances at him, confusion swirling in her mind. "Why did you buy me?" she finally asked. Ethan smirked. "Because no one else did." Zira frowned. "That's not a reason." He glanced at her, his expression softening. "I know what it's like to be unwanted." Zira's breath hitched. She wasn't sure why, but those words settled deep in her chest. Before she could ask more, a sudden alarm blared through the auction hall. Ethan's face darkened. "We need to go. Now." He grabbed her wrist, pulling her through the chaotic marketplace. Behind them, armed guards poured into the auction hall. "Stop them!" one of the aliens roared. "That human stole Solari property." Zira's eyes widened. "They're after me." Ethan pulled a sleek silver device from his belt and tapped a button. In an instant, his body flickered, and a transparent energy field wrapped around them. A cloaking device. Zira watched in amazement as Ethan moved swiftly through the crowd, unseen by the guards. He led her through winding corridors, past dimly lit alleys, until they reached a sleek black spaceship docked at the far end of the station. As they ran up the ramp, Zyra's heart pounded. Was she escaping one prison just to be trapped in another? The engines roared to life, and the ship shot into the stars. Zira gripped the seat as they broke through the atmosphere, her breath shallow. "Where are we going?" she asked. Ethan looked at her, his expression unreadable. "Somewhere safe." Zira swallowed hard. For the first time since she had been cast out, she felt something unfamiliar. Hope. The golden lights of the slave market flickered against the polished metal floors, casting eerie reflections of the helpless beings trapped in glowing containment fields. Zira stood among them, her delicate hands bound in shimmering energy cuffs. Her silver skin glowed faintly under the artificial lighting, her violet eyes scanning the sea of alien faces, but none of them looked at her with anything but disdain. She was nothing to them. Weak, unwanted. The auction was already underway, the air buzzing with the sounds of eager traders placing their bids. Massive alien warlords bickered over the strongest slaves. Brutal gladiators, battle-hardened soldiers, and exotic creatures with deadly abilities. Zira was the only one left ignored. Itni Choti Hai, Koi Feda Nati Iska. An alien with thick, scaly skin scoffed. "Weaklings Hamari Race K Hissa Nahiban Sakti." Another sneered. The auctioneer, a grotesque being with 3 luminous eyes and a wide, greedy mouth, smirked as he motioned toward Zira. "Ah, and here we have something unusual. A Xilari princess. Barely of use, but a rare piece nonetheless." Laughter echoed through the chamber. Nobody wants a useless princess. Even her own people threw her away. Zira lowered her head, her breath shaky. She knew her race only valued strength, but to be discarded like this, like she was worthless. Her hands clenched, but the glowing cuffs only tightened, their energy biting into her wrists. The auctioneer sighed dramatically. "No bids. A shame. Perhaps she should be. I'll take her." The voice cut through the noise like a blade, silencing the room. Every alien turned toward the speaker. A human. Ethan Carter leaned against a metal pillar at the back of the hall, his arms crossed. His rugged leather jacket was worn from years of battle, and his sharp, steel-gray eyes surveyed the room without fear. A holstered plasma pistol rested at his hip, and a high-tech wrist device blinked faintly with green lights. The auctioneer hesitated. "You, human, are you sure?" Ethan stepped forward, his boots clicking against the floor. "Yeah, I'm sure." A wave of murmurs rippled through the crowd. A human buying a Xilari princess. It was unheard of. Zira blinked in confusion. "Why?" she whispered, barely audible. Lord Vex's guards, massive warriors with reinforced armor, moved forward, their heavy weapons gleaming under the market's lights. Hum Insan and co-slaves, not healing date. One of them barked. Ethan smirked. Good thing I don't play by your rules. Before anyone could react, Ethan's wrist device flashed, and his body flickered for a second, then disappeared. A cloaking device. In an instant, he reappeared behind one of the guards, slamming his fist into the alien's skull. The warrior stumbled, but Ethan was already moving. With a swift motion, he grabbed the guard's plasma blade and twisted it out of his grip. The hall erupted into chaos. Another guard charged at Ethan, but the human was faster. He ducked under the alien's heavy strike and landed a brutal kick to the warrior's side, sending him crashing into a pile of metal crates. Zyra's breath hitched. She had never seen a human fight like this. She had always been told humans were weak, that they were nothing but insignificant scavengers in the galaxy. But here he was outnumbered, outmatched, and yet winning. The auctioneer scrambled back, pressing a hidden switch on his chair. A metal door slid open, revealing a robotic bounty hunter, its sleek black armor gleaming under the lights, red eyes glowing with murderous intent. The robot lunged. Ethan barely had time to react before a plasma blade sliced through the air where his head had been a second ago. He twisted, barely avoiding the attack, then fired his plasma pistol. The shot hit the robot's armor, but barely left a scratch. The bounty hunter struck again, this time aiming for Ethan's legs. He jumped back just in time, rolling to avoid a second attack. "This thing's annoying," Ethan muttered. Zyra watched, her heart racing. Could he really win? The robot lunged again, but this time, Ethan was ready. He activated his wrist device, and his cloaking field flickered on. The bounty hunter hesitated for just a second, long enough for Ethan to strike. He reappeared behind it and shoved an EMP device onto its back. VZCT. The robot convulsed, its systems overloading. Sparks flew as it collapsed to the ground, twitching violently. Silence filled the hall. Ethan turned back toward the auctioneer, his pistol aimed at the alien's forehead. "Release her." The auctioneer swallowed hard and pressed a button. Zyra's shackles clicked open and fell to the ground. She stared at Ethan in disbelief. He had fought all of that for her. He held out a hand. "Come on, we're leaving." Zyra hesitated. Trusting an outsider, especially a human, was unthinkable for her race. But as she looked around at the faces of the aliens who had mocked her, who had abandoned her, she realized she had no choice. She took his hand. Ethan smirked. Good choice. Alarms suddenly blared throughout the station. "More guards are coming," Ethan said. "We need to move." He pulled her through the market, weaving between shocked onlookers. Zyra's mind raced. This was insane. She was escaping the auction, but with a human. As they reached the docking bay, Zyra spotted a massive warship blocking the exit. Her heart sank. "That's a Xilari cruiser," she whispered. "My uncle's." Ethan glanced at it. "Guess they really don't want you leaving." The warship's weapons began to glow, ready to fire. Ethan tapped his wrist device. Not today. His ship, a sleek black stealth cruiser, suddenly decloaked right in front of them. Its side door slid open. "Get in," Ethan shouted. They sprinted up the ramp just as laser fire rained down behind them. The ship's engines roared to life, and in seconds, they shot out of the docking bay. Zyra clutched the seat, breathing heavily. She had done it. She had escaped. Ethan glanced at her. "You okay?" She nodded, though she wasn't sure if she meant it. "Where are we going?" she asked. Ethan smirked as he set the ship's course. "Somewhere they'll never find you." Ethan's ship shot through the darkness of space, its engines roaring as it accelerated away from the station. Zyra clung to the co-pilot's seat, her hands trembling. She could still hear the echoes of the slave auction, the laughter of the aliens who had called her weak. But the danger wasn't over. A sudden explosion rocked the ship. The warning lights flashed red. They're following us. Zira gasped, looking at the radar screen. 3 massive galactic guard warships were closing in fast. Ethan clenched his jaw. Of course they are. With a swift movement, he pulled the controls, sending the ship into a sharp dive. Plasma blasts streaked past them, barely missing their hull. Zira gripped the armrest. Can we outrun them? Maybe. Ethan's eyes darted across the control panel. Hold on. The ship jolted as he punched the hyperspeed thrusters. Stars turned into streaks of light as they shot forward at impossible speed. For a moment, Zira felt a flicker of hope. Maybe they had escaped. Then the alarms blared again. They've locked onto us, Ethan muttered. They have advanced trackers. Hyperspeed won't shake them off. Zira's heart pounded. Then what do we do? Ethan smirked. We fight. She stared at him, stunned. Fight? Against Galactic Guard warships? That was suicide. Before she could protest, the ship jolted again. This time, the enemy fighters had caught up. Sleek black ships with glowing blue engines surrounded them, their weapons charging. A mechanical voice crackled through the ship's speakers. Surrender the auxiliary princess. Resistance is futile. Zira's stomach twisted. They weren't here for Ethan. They wanted her. She turned to him. Just let me go. Maybe they won't hurt you. Ethan's expression hardened. Not happening. The ship rocked as enemy drones swarmed in, firing rapid plasma bolts. Ethan's fingers flew over the controls. A defense system, online. A deep robotic voice responded, engaging countermeasures. Suddenly, the ship's external cannons sprang to life. Automated turrets locked onto the incoming drones, firing precise energy blasts. Explosions lit up the void of space as enemy fighters fell one by one. But the guards weren't giving up. A massive warship loomed ahead, its shadow stretching across the stars. Zira's breath caught in her throat. That's Lord Vex's flagship, she whispered. Ethan didn't blink. Of course it is. The warship's hangar doors opened, releasing dozens of assassin fighters. Sleek, AI-controlled drones, far deadlier than the ones before. Ethan's grip tightened on the controls. Okay, new plan. We need cover. Zira frowned. Cover? In space. Ethan smirked and tilted his head toward the radar. A massive asteroid field lay just ahead. Zira's eyes widened. You're not serious. Completely serious. Before she could argue, Ethan steered the ship straight toward the floating maze of massive, jagged rocks. The enemy fighters hesitated for just a second, then followed. The chase was on. The ship weaved between the colossal asteroids, barely squeezing through the narrow gaps. Zira's fingers dug into the seat as Ethan maneuvered like a madman, dodging and twisting through the debris. The enemy drones weren't so lucky. Some slammed into floating rocks, exploding on impact. Others tried to keep up but were outmatched by Ethan's unpredictable movements. A warning flashed on the screen. Missiles incoming. Zira gasped. They're going to blast the whole field apart. Ethan's eyes narrowed. Not if I blast them first. He flipped a switch, and the ship's underbelly opened. Deploying anti-gravity grenades, the AI announced. Small, glowing spheres shot out of the ship, pulsing with blue energy. The moment they exploded, a massive gravitational wave rippled through the asteroid field. The pursuing fighters were thrown off course. Some spiraled out of control. Others were crushed as asteroids were violently pulled together. The ship finally broke free from the field, speeding into open space. Zira exhaled sharply. Did we lose them? Ethan checked the radar. For now. She stared at him, still trying to process everything. This human, this stranger, had just risked his life to save her. Her mind raced with questions. Finally, she spoke. Why? Ethan raised an eyebrow. Why what? Why are you helping me? She swallowed hard. I'm nothing to you. I'm just an unwanted princess. Ethan was silent for a moment. Then he gave a small, almost sad smile. "You're an unwanted princess," he said. "And I'm an unwanted human." Zira's breath caught in her throat. Ethan leaned back in his seat, staring at the endless stars ahead. "Maybe that's why I understand you." The remote planet where Ethan had taken her was nothing like the cold metallic halls of the Galactic Council or the lavish golden palaces of her homeworld. It was wild, lush green forests stretching endlessly, rivers glistening under twin suns, and skies so clear that at night the stars felt within reach. She had never lived outside of a fortress before. She had never been free. Ethan had built a small hideout, a simple but strong shelter made from reinforced alloy. His best friend and fellow human, Bonner, had helped him. Zira liked Bonner. He was loud, always cracking jokes, always teasing Ethan about how he had suddenly become a guardian of a runaway princess. But more than anything, Zira was learning about humans. She watched how Ethan and Bonner fought, not with hatred, not with arrogance, but with strategy and precision. They taught her how to hold a weapon, how to predict an enemy's movements. Ethan even taught her how to fight without weapons, how to use speed against strength. "Humans don't just fight," Ethan had told her. "We survive." Zira had always believed her people were the greatest warriors in the galaxy. But watching Ethan, she realized something terrifying. Humans weren't just warriors. They were something else entirely. They were survivors, and they were dangerous in a way the galaxy had never understood. The betrayal came on a quiet evening. Bonner had been cooking something over an open flame, a meal Zira had grown to love, something called grilled meat. Ethan had been fixing the ship, making sure they could leave at a moment's notice. Zira had been practicing a knife-throwing technique Ethan had taught her when she felt it. Something was wrong. The air smelled different, like burning metal. The wind carried a deep, unnatural hum, a sound she knew too well. Warships. She turned just as the sky exploded with fire. The Galactic Empire had found them. Troopers in black armor descended from the ships like shadows, weapons raised. Bonner was the first to react. He grabbed his rifle and fired the first shot. One of the troopers dropped, but there were too many. "Run," Bonner yelled. Ethan grabbed Zira's wrist and pulled her toward the shelter, but she resisted. "We can't leave Bonner. He can handle himself." Ethan growled, but Zira could see it in his eyes. He didn't believe his own words. The battle was chaos. Laser fire lit up the night. Bonner fought like a demon, dropping one trooper after another, his rifle spitting plasma. Zira had never seen someone fight like this before. He wasn't fighting to win. He was fighting to make sure Ethan and Zira escaped. And then, a trooper got past his defenses. Zira's scream echoed through the forest as the energy blade plunged through Bonner's chest. Ethan turned, and for the first time, Zira saw something in his eyes she had never seen before. Rage. He moved faster than she had ever seen. He didn't fire his weapon. He threw it aside. He wanted to feel it. He wanted them to feel it. Ethan tore through the troopers with his bare hands. A knife into the throat. A rifle ripped from a dying soldier and used to bash another's skull. A stolen plasma blade slicing through armor. It was brutality Zira had never witnessed. Not even her own people, the so-called greatest warriors, fought like this. The Galactic Council had always laughed at humans, calling them weak, calling them insignificant. They had no idea. By the time the last trooper fell, Ethan was covered in blood. His hands trembled. He was breathing hard. And Bonner was gone. Ethan collapsed beside his best friend's body. Zira knelt next to him, staring at Bonner's still face. "Why? Why did he do that?" Zira whispered. Ethan closed his eyes. "Because that's what humans do." Zira's chest ached. She had seen warriors die before. Her people had always told her that war was glorious, that death was a privilege for the strong. But Bonner hadn't died for glory. He had died for them. And for the first time, Zira understood. Humans didn't fight for power. They fought for each other. Zira stood beside Ethan, her hands clenched into fists, her heart pounding in her chest. The weight of everything that had happened, the betrayal, Bonner's death, the truth about humans, crashed down on her like a tidal wave. But she no longer felt weak. For the first time, she saw herself not as an unwanted princess, but as a warrior. And this time, she wouldn't run. Ethan and Zira had a plan. A reckless, impossible plan. They were going to bring down the Galactic Senate. The Senate had ruled the galaxy for centuries, a council of the strongest, most ruthless warlords. They controlled everything, the military, the economy, the laws. They were untouchable. Until now. Because Ethan wasn't just any human. He was furious. He was done running. And he had a suit that made him a one-man army. The Galactic Senate headquarters was a fortress of metal and glass, floating above a planet-sized city. Security was airtight. Hundreds of elite guards, A-controlled drones, and energy shields that could stop a fleet of warships. It didn't matter. Ethan and Zira were coming. Inside the stolen stealth ship, Ethan suited up. The exosuit hummed with power as he locked it onto his body. Black metal wrapped around him like a second skin, amplifying his strength, speed, and reflexes. Zira watched as he flexed his fingers, and the suit responded instantly. With this, he wasn't just a soldier anymore. He was a force of nature. Zira took a deep breath. She wasn't going to be useless in this fight. Her race had a hidden power, telepathic abilities, something she had never fully embraced. But now she focused. She let her mind stretch outward, feeling the waves of thought from the countless beings inside the Senate. She could hear their voices, their secrets, their fears, and she could use them. The battle began the moment they stepped inside. Alarms blared. Guards poured in from every direction, weapons raised. Ethan moved first. He was a blur, too fast to track, too strong to stop. One guard fired a plasma rifle. Ethan dodged effortlessly, his enhanced reflexes making it look easy. He grabbed the soldier by the throat, lifted him like a ragdoll, and slammed him into the ground with enough force to shatter the floor. Zira stepped forward, her eyes glowing with power. She reached into the minds of the soldiers, planting doubt, confusion, fear. Some of them turned on each other, suddenly unsure of their orders. Others dropped their weapons, overwhelmed by terror. They pushed forward, cutting through the defenses like a storm. Then Lord Vex appeared. Zira froze as she saw him. Her uncle, the one who had betrayed her, standing at the top of the Senate chamber, surrounded by high-ranking warlords. He smirked. "You think you can win, little princess." Ethan didn't hesitate. He launched himself forward, covering the distance in a blink. He punched one of the warlords in the face, and the impact was so powerful that the alien's skull caved in. Another warlord lunged at him with an energy sword, but Ethan caught the blade with his bare hand, crushed it, and headbutted the attacker into unconsciousness. Lord Vex backed away, eyes wide. This isn't possible," he stammered. Zira stepped beside Ethan, her voice steady. "You never understood humans. You thought they were weak. But you never asked yourself, why does the galaxy keep fearing them?" Lord Vex snarled and pulled out a hidden weapon, a plasma pistol, aimed straight at Zira. Ethan moved faster than thought. He grabbed Vex's wrist, twisting it brutally until bones snapped. The gun clattered to the ground. Vex screamed. Ethan lifted him effortlessly, holding him over the Senate chamber, where thousands of alien leaders watched in stunned silence. "This man betrayed his own blood," Ethan's voice echoed through the chamber. "He sold his own niece to slavers. He is not fit to rule." The Senate erupted into chaos. Some shouted in agreement. Others tried to protest, but Zira focused her telepathic powers, amplifying their fears, their guilt. She let them feel the truth. One by one, they turned on Lord Vex. The guards dragged him away. The ruling council was finished. The Galactic Senate had fallen. And for the first time, Zira was free. She turned to Ethan, her heart pounding. "What now?" she asked. For centuries, the Galactic Senate ruled with an iron grip, believing themselves to be untouchable. They had shaped laws, controlled planets, and crushed any who dared to defy them. But they had underestimated two beings, a forgotten princess and a lone human warrior. Zira, once considered too weak to lead, now stood at the center of a new galactic order. And Ethan Carter, a human who had once been nothing more than a mercenary, was now the most feared and respected warrior in the stars. The coronation hall was unlike anything Ethan had ever seen. Zira stood on a raised platform, draped in royal armor that shimmered with an energy he could barely comprehend. Her long silver hair flowed behind her like a river of light, and her violet eyes burned with determination. But this was not just her moment. This was the birth of something greater. Ethan stood beside her, arms crossed, scanning the massive crowd of alien leaders, generals, and diplomats who had gathered from across the galaxy. Some had once been their enemies. Now, they bowed in respect. A voice echoed through the chamber as the official proclamation began. By the will of the people, by the strength of the warriors, and by the sacrifice of the fallen, Zira, daughter of the stars, is now Queen of the United Galactic Nations. The hall erupted into applause. But Zira didn't look at the crowd. She looked at Ethan. As the cheers faded, she stepped toward him, her voice steady but filled with emotion. "You saved me when I was nothing," she said softly. "You fought for me when I had no one. And when the entire galaxy laughed at me, you stood by my side." Ethan smirked. "Well, someone had to do it." Zira shook her head. "It wasn't just duty. It wasn't just survival. You are my first real friend, Ethan Carter. And no matter what happens next, you will always be my greatest one." Ethan felt something tighten in his chest. He had been a soldier, a fighter, a survivor. But standing here, beside a girl who had once been abandoned, he realized something. He wasn't alone anymore. The galaxy would never be the same. Under Zira's rule, the old systems of power crumbled. No longer would the strong dominate the weak. No longer would races be judged by their size, their strength, or their history. And humanity. Humanity was no longer seen as weak. They had fought against the greatest powers in the universe and won. Ethan Carter, the lone human warrior, had become a legend. Stories of his battles spread across the stars, of the night he destroyed an entire war fleet, of the moment he took down Lord Vex with his bare hands, of the time he defied an empire to save one lost girl. Some called him the ghost of war. Others called him the emperor without a crown. But to Zira, he would always just be Ethan, the first person who ever believed in her. And as they stood together, staring out into the vastness of space, one thing was certain. This was just the beginning.